Marcus Webb had been a state health inspector for the Department of Public Health for 14 years when he walked into a situation that would expose his son to racial trauma, cost a restaurant $1.9 million, and destroy the career of the manager who thought a black family didn't belong at his table. He was 48 years old, experienced enough to understand consequences, but that night he discovered that credentials and authority mean nothing when bias decides you're a threat. One Saturday evening in April, Webb took his wife and two children, ages 14 and 11, to celebrate his daughter's straight-A report card at an upscale steakhouse. What happened next? A manager's racial profiling that escalated into a wrongful police response would become proof that discrimination doesn't care about your job title, your income, your family status, or your contribution to society. It only cares about skin color. Marcus Webb, a black man in his late 40s, sat at a corner table in the main dining room of Monarch Steakhouse with his wife Diane and their two children, Marcus Jr. and Amelia. His daughter had just received her report card. No disruption, no disturbance, no violation, just a father celebrating his daughter's academic achievement with his family. But manager Robert Sinclair saw them through a filter so distorted by assumptions about who deserves to dine in an upscale establishment that he couldn't process a black family as legitimate customers. Before we continue, where are you watching from? If this is your first time here, please hit that subscribe button. Stories like these need to be shared, and your support helps us bring more truth to light. Monarch Steakhouse sits on Westlake Boulevard in the Oakmont District, an upscale commercial neighborhood known for fine dining, professional offices, and high-income residential areas. The restaurant occupies a corner lot in a renovated historic building, with floor-to-ceiling windows, dark wood paneling, and leather banquettes. Soft jazz plays overhead. The wine list runs 40 pages. Average entree price, $68. The typical clientele is overwhelmingly white business people conducting deals, couples on special occasions, families celebrating milestones. It was 6:38 p.m. on a Saturday in April. The sun was beginning its descent behind the buildings across the street. The restaurant was moderately busy, perhaps 60% capacity. The bar was full. The dining room had the controlled hum of elevated conversation and clinking glasses. Every table appeared occupied by white diners, and servers moved between tables with practiced efficiency. The kind of evening where nothing dramatic typically happens, where the restaurant runs according to carefully maintained social norms that no one explicitly states but everyone understands. Marcus Webb had been a state health inspector with the Department of Public Health for 14 years. 14 years of inspecting restaurants, food processing facilities, catering operations, and commercial kitchens. He'd conducted over 2,800 inspections. He'd identified contamination issues that prevented foodborne illness outbreaks. He'd trained junior inspectors in proper inspection protocols. He'd testified before the health board about violations that cost establishments operating licenses. His supervisors called him thorough. His colleagues called him the inspector who caught what others missed. He'd received a Public Health Excellence Award 3 times. Webb had graduated from Northern State University with a degree in environmental health sciences, then completed the state's Certified Health Inspector program, where he'd ranked 3rd in his cohort. He'd completed advanced certifications in food safety, HACCP principles, and emerging foodborne pathogens. He'd published research in the Journal of Environmental Health about detection methods for listeria in commercial kitchens. His certifications were current, his background check was clean, and his employment record was exemplary. At 48 years old, Marcus Webb was exactly where he'd worked to be. Respected in his field, trusted with responsibility, and raising 2 children with his wife of 18 years, Diane. He coached youth basketball at the community center on Wednesday nights. He'd never been arrested, never been cited for traffic violations, never been involved in any incident that would suggest he was anything other than a contributing member of society. His children knew him as patient, principled, and someone who believed in following rules and teaching his kids to do the same. That Saturday, Webb had taken his family to Monarch Steakhouse to celebrate his daughter Amelia's straight-A report card for the spring semester. She was 14 years old, a freshman at Westlake Academy, one of the most competitive schools in the district. Webb's son, Marcus Jr., 11, was there to celebrate his sister. Webb and his wife Diane had made a reservation for 4 at 6:30 p.m. They arrived at 6:28 p.m., dressed in business casual. Webb in a blue button-down shirt and slacks, his wife in a navy dress, the children in clean, neat clothing appropriate for a restaurant this level. They checked in at the host stand. The host, a young white woman, had hesitated for just a moment before directing them to their table. They'd ordered almost immediately. Water for the children, a glass of wine each for the adults, and appetizers calamari, shrimp sauté, and bruschetta. Webb wore no visible credentials. His state ID and inspector certification were at home in his desk. He was simply a father out with his family. Everything about the situation was ordinary, legitimate, and deserving of the same service any other family would receive. But to Robert Sinclair, the manager on duty that evening, the presence of a black family in his dining room was a problem that needed to be solved. Robert Sinclair was 41 years old. He'd been the general manager at Monarch Steakhouse for 5 years. He was conscientious about operational details and deeply concerned with maintaining what he called the restaurant's brand and clientele. His supervisors described him as detail-oriented but sometimes lacking in cultural sensitivity. His staff called him demanding and particular about how the restaurant should look and who should be in it. In 5 years at Monarch Steakhouse, Sinclair had compiled a record that should have raised concerns with the ownership. 6 complaints related to discriminatory service. 6. 5 of them involved allegations that Sinclair had offered subpar service, made unwelcoming comments, or deliberately seated black customers at less desirable tables in back dining areas away from the main room. 1 complaint had been sustained by corporate, resulting in mandatory diversity training. The other 5 had been dismissed as subjective disagreements about service quality. Sinclair had never been terminated or seriously disciplined. Sinclair had a pattern. He responded with suspicion to black customers who didn't fit his preconceived notion of who belonged in an upscale establishment. A black couple in their 60s who'd tried to make a reservation had been told all tables were booked, despite availability. A black businessman dining alone had been asked repeatedly if he could pay his bill before his meal arrived. A black family with teenage children had been seated at a table next to the kitchen, despite numerous premium tables being available. The pattern was clear. The documentation existed in complaint files that corporate had received but never acted upon. At 6:43 p.m., 5 minutes after the Webb family ordered their appetizers, Robert Sinclair noticed them in the dining room. In his mind, something didn't fit. They didn't look like the usual clientele. They seemed out of place. He didn't consider that they were paying customers who'd made a reservation. He didn't think about the possibility that black families might celebrate achievements at restaurants the same way white families did. He just saw a black family and decided they didn't belong. He watched them for several minutes, observing that they were speaking quietly, that the children were well behaved, that nothing about their behavior justified concern, but their presence alone was enough. Sinclair approached their table at 6:47 p.m. His mind had already filled in a narrative. These people must be uncomfortable here, or other guests must be uncomfortable with them here. The situation needed to be managed. On the details that in his biased perception meant these customers were a liability. He walked directly to their table with a forced smile that didn't reach his eyes. Do you think managers should face consequences for attempting to remove paying customers based on racial bias? Marcus Webb was mid-sentence, telling his daughter that straight A's opened every door if she kept the momentum going, when he became aware of the manager standing beside their table. He looked up and saw a man in his 40s, white, wearing the restaurant's manager uniform, with an expression that immediately signaled conflict. You need to leave. Right now. Webb's confusion was genuine. We're paying customers. We just sat down. We made a reservation. Sinclair's jaw tightened. Management policy. You're making other guests uncomfortable. We haven't done anything. We ordered appetizers 5 minutes ago. Webb's wife, Diane, placed her hand on his arm, a gesture that said, "Be careful, handle this correctly." Sinclair leaned down slightly, his voice lower but no less aggressive. You're disrupting the atmosphere. I'm asking you to leave voluntarily, or I'll call the police. Webb felt the shift in the room. Nearby diners had turned to look. A server had paused mid-step. His daughter Amelia looked frightened. Call them, Webb said quietly. My name is Marcus Webb. I'm a state health inspector. I've eaten here a dozen times. You know me. So, whatever's happening here, It's not about restaurant policy. Sinclair's expression hardened. A health inspector. That doesn't matter. You don't belong here tonight. He said it deliberately. Each word a statement of absolute certainty. Leave now, or I'm calling 911. Webb pulled out his phone. On it was his state ID, his inspector certification, his employment verification. He held it up so Sinclair could see it clearly. Here's my credential. Here's my employment verification. You can call the Department of Public Health. You can verify my identity in 90 seconds. This is harassment. Sinclair glanced at the phone dismissively. Anyone can fake a screenshot. That changes nothing. He turned away, already moving back toward his office to make the call. Webb called after him. Sir, you cannot remove paying customers for no reason. This is illegal. This is discrimination. His words meant nothing. Sinclair had already decided the outcome. This is where assumptions become accusations, where bias becomes so complete that evidence can't penetrate it, where a manager's decision about who belongs has already been made before any rational thought occurs. Robert Sinclair didn't need to verify Marcus Webb's credentials because he'd already reached his conclusion. The credential, the state ID, the evidence held in Webb's hand, none of it mattered because Sinclair had seen a black family and decided they were a problem. When bias operates this completely, when it's so embedded in someone's worldview that contradictory evidence is simply dismissed as fake or irrelevant, it becomes impenetrable. The dining room had gone still. Conversation stopped. People turned openly now, no longer pretending not to stare. Phones came out. A woman at the next table recorded video. A man at the bar stood up. Marcus Webb's voice remained controlled, despite the anger rising in his chest. His wife kept her hand on his arm. His children watched, learning in real time what it meant to be black in a space that didn't want them. This is ridiculous, Webb said loudly enough for nearby tables to hear. I'm a public health official. I've been here before. I have a reservation. My children did nothing wrong. A server appeared, looking uncomfortable, clearly unsure whether to intervene or stay silent. Another diner called out from a table across the room. That's discrimination. Let them eat. A woman near the window pulled out her phone. The camera clearly pointed at their table. Sinclair returned 5 minutes later. Police are on their way. You need to leave the restaurant now. Webb stood. We're leaving, but I'm not walking out. I'm being escorted out. I want everyone here to remember that. I want everyone here to know that this family was removed because of skin color. Sinclair gestured toward the door. The message was clear. Go, or the confrontation would worsen. The Webb family gathered their things. Webb noticed the server had left their appetizers in the kitchen, untouched. 14-year-old Amelia had tears in her eyes. 11-year-old Marcus Jr. looked angry and confused. 2 Seattle Police Department officers arrived as the family exited the restaurant. The call had been logged as a disturbance, potential trespassing. The officers approached with hands on their belts, the standard posture of responding to a potentially confrontational situation. Sir, we received a call about a disturbance. What's happening here? We're leaving, Webb said. But I want you to know what actually happened inside. The officers looked at each other. One of them turned back to Webb. Sir, have you been asked to leave? Yes, by a manager who claimed we were making guests uncomfortable. We made a reservation. We ordered food. We paid for it. We did nothing to justify being removed from that restaurant. Should police investigate discrimination complaints before escorting families from restaurants? Let me know what you think. The second officer, Officer Teresa Martinez, had 12 years on the force and had seen plenty of these situations. She'd also been the subject of her own profiling before she became a cop. Something about this call didn't add up. Let me go back inside and talk to the manager, she said. She returned to the restaurant and found Robert Sinclair near the host stand. She introduced herself and asked for his side of the story. Sinclair explained his version. The family was making guests uncomfortable. They'd become argumentative when he asked them to leave. They were disrupting the atmosphere. He'd called police because they wouldn't comply. Officer Martinez asked a simple question. Did this family do anything illegal? Did they violate any law? No, Sinclair admitted. But management policy allows us to remove customers who don't fit our clientele profile. Officer Martinez's expression changed. She pulled out her phone and called the Department of Public Health directly. Within minutes, she had confirmation. Marcus Webb was an active, certified state health inspector with 14 years of employment and an exemplary record. She walked back to Sinclair. That man outside is a state health inspector. You asked him to leave a restaurant because of his race. That's a civil rights violation. You understand that, right? Sinclair's face went pale. Officer Martinez returned to the Webb family outside. Mr. Webb, I verified your employment and credentials. The manager discriminated against you based on race. I'm documenting this as a civil rights violation. The restaurant will be hearing from the Civil Rights Division. You did nothing wrong. Your family did nothing wrong. Webb nodded, the anger and humiliation settling into something colder. Determination to pursue this legally. I want a written report of this incident, Webb said. I want the names of all officers who responded. And I want the names of all customers who witnessed what happened. Officer Martinez provided all of it. She also gave Webb the number for the city's civil rights office. That night, Webb called Monarch Steakhouse's corporate office and left a voicemail detailing everything that had occurred. The discriminatory removal, the false assertion about management policy, the police response. He mentioned his position as a state health inspector, but made clear that he was speaking as a customer and father, not as an official conducting an inspection. The corporate office called back the next morning. Should corporate immediately terminate managers after verified racial discrimination incidents? Drop your answer below. Within 18 hours, the video shot by diners at Monarch Steakhouse had accumulated 1.2 million views on social media. The footage showed everything. Sinclair telling the family they didn't belong, Webb calmly presenting his credentials, Sinclair dismissing them, the family being escorted out while other diners recorded. The audio captured children crying, a father's controlled voice, and the absolute certainty of a manager exercising power he didn't actually possess. Racist manager ejects black family. From Steakhouse father is state health inspector. Family asked to leave five-star restaurant, calls police. Dad refuses to leave quietly. You don't belong here, discrimination caught on video, as black family celebrating daughter's achievement removed from restaurant. The outrage was immediate and intense. The NAACP called for a full investigation. Local civil rights organizations demanded accountability. News outlets covered the story. The hashtag number Monarch Steakhouse trended for 36 hours. Robert Sinclair's career imploded within 48 hours. Monarch Steakhouse placed him on immediate administrative leave pending investigation. The corporate office conducted its own review of all complaints filed against him over 5 years. The investigation confirmed the pattern. 6 prior complaints involving discriminatory service, including this one. 5 of the 6 involved black customers. Sinclair released a statement through his attorney. I sincerely apologize if my actions were misinterpreted. I was following restaurant policy regarding customer disruption. I regret any hurt caused to this family. The apology changed nothing. Corporate Monarch Steakhouse terminated his employment 8 days after the incident. Marcus Webb contacted a civil rights attorney the Monday after the incident. The lawsuit was filed 16 days later. It named Robert Sinclair individually, Monarch Steakhouse as the employer, and the restaurant's corporate ownership for failing to address Sinclair's documented pattern of discriminatory behavior. The claims were extensive and damaging. Asterisk. Unlawful discrimination based on race in violation of the state public accommodations law. Asterisk. Intentional infliction of emotional distress against all family members, including minors. Asterisk. Negligent supervision and failure to prevent discrimination despite prior complaints. Asterisk. Violation of civil rights under federal and state law. Asterisk. Emotional and psychological harm to children. Asterisk. Defamation of character through false accusation of disruption. The complaint included Sinclair's complete record, 6 prior complaints over 5 years, all involving allegations of discriminatory service, all documented, all dismissed or resolved with minimal consequence. The complaint included testimony from previous customers who'd experienced discrimination from Sinclair. The complaint included the video evidence showing zero disruption from the Webb family. Monarch Steakhouse's attorneys reviewed the evidence, and evidence review reached the same conclusion. Indefensible. The video evidence alone was devastating. Multiple witnesses, verified credentials, children present, pattern of prior discrimination, the restaurant's failure to address Sinclair's behavior despite known complaints. Monarch Steakhouse settled 14 months later, $1.9 million paid to the Webb family. The settlement included a requirement that the restaurant implement mandatory civil rights training for all management, establish a formal non-discrimination policy, and conduct annual audits of hiring and employee conduct practices. Robert Sinclair's termination letter, dated 9 days after the incident, was direct and final. Your employment with Monarch Steakhouse is terminated effective immediately. Your actions on April 18 constituted unlawful discrimination against paying customers based on race. Your removal of the Webb family violated state law, federal civil rights protections, and restaurant policy. Your employment record includes 6 documented complaints involving allegations of racial discrimination over your 5-year tenure. Despite mandatory training and counseling, your conduct continued. The restaurant has determined that your continuation of employment is not viable. Your name will be reported to the Hospitality Industry Misconduct Database. Sinclair appealed the termination. The appeal was denied. At 41 years old, his career in hospitality management ended completely. His name entered industry blacklists. He never worked in restaurant management again. Marcus Webb testified before the City Council's Civil Rights Committee 3 weeks after settlement was reached. His testimony was clear and purposeful. I'm Marcus Webb. I'm a state health inspector. I've been employed by the Department of Public Health for 14 years. I have an exemplary employment record. I've conducted over 2,800 restaurant inspections. I've never been arrested. I've never violated any law. I'm a father and a husband. I coached my daughter's basketball team. He paused. On April 18, I took my family to Monarch Steakhouse to celebrate my daughter's straight-A report card. We made a reservation. We checked in. We ordered food. My children did nothing wrong. My wife did nothing wrong. I did nothing wrong. A manager decided we didn't belong there, told us to leave, and called police when we refused. Another pause. His voice steadied. I had to explain to my 14-year-old daughter why a restaurant manager told her she didn't belong there. I had to explain to my 11-year-old son that people would sometimes decide things about him based on how he looked, not on who he was. I had to explain that even when I showed credentials, even when I cited my position, even when I was completely within my rights, none of that mattered because someone else decided my skin color made me a problem. He looked directly at the council. I'm one of the people charged with ensuring food safety in this city. I have authority over restaurants. I have credentials. I have power. And despite all of that, I was discriminated against. What happens to people without those resources? What happens to families without legal representation? What happens to black people who can't afford to fight back? The room was silent. $1.9 million is significant. It acknowledges harm, but it doesn't undo my daughter's tears that night. It doesn't erase the message we sent to our children that safety and belonging are not guaranteed, even in spaces you pay to occupy. Should restaurants be required to post their non-discrimination policies at every entrance? Let me know in the comments. This wasn't just about one evening. This wasn't just about one manager and one family. This was about a system that allowed discrimination to continue without real consequence. A system where Robert Sinclair could compile 6 documented complaints of racial discrimination over 5 years and face no termination, no investigation at the corporate level, no meaningful accountability, until a viral video forced action. Robert Sinclair's pattern told the story his supervisors ignored. 6 complaints in 5 years, all involving people of color, all documented in the complaint system, but each was treated in isolation. Sinclair attended mandatory diversity training, he received written reprimands, he received counseling, yet the behavior continued because the system treated each incident as separate, never connecting the dots, never acknowledging what the pattern revealed. A manager with a fundamental commitment to discriminatory practices. Sinclair's career is over. That's justice. The restaurant paid $1.9 million. That's accountability. The corporate office implemented new policies. That's consequence. But $1.9 million doesn't undo the trauma to children. It doesn't restore dignity. It doesn't erase the message that black families have to question whether public spaces will welcome them. The real question is, what changes now? Do hospitality companies finally remove managers after 3 complaints of discrimination instead of 6? Do corporate offices finally connect the dots at complaint 2? Do we finally acknowledge that when someone is removed from a restaurant for making people uncomfortable, that almost always means being black in a space where whiteness is the assumed default? Because if we don't fix the system that allowed Sinclair to accumulate 6 complaints without termination, if we don't address the culture that teaches managers to suspect black customers, if we don't require corporate accountability when patterns emerge, then we're just waiting for the next manager, the next restaurant, the next family, the next viral video. Comment if you believe this should be law. Restaurants with documented discrimination complaints triggering mandatory independent civil rights audits, with termination of discriminatory employees within 30 days, and with financial penalties of $50,000 minimum for each verified incident to fund civil rights training and enforcement. And if you think these stories need to be told, if you believe accountability starts with awareness and change starts with pressure, then hit that subscribe button. We're not stopping. We're going to keep exposing these patterns. We're going to keep demanding better. We're going to keep fighting for the families being told they don't belong, for the children learning what discrimination feels like, for every person who walked into a space they had every right to occupy and was told to leave. This isn't just about one manager or one restaurant or one family. It's about all of us and the world we're willing to accept. It's about whether we build systems where credentials and behavior matter or systems where skin color determines belonging. It's about whether we demand better